On the distant planet of Valen, two alien twins, Lyra and Zara, were on the brink of death. Their ship had crash-landed days ago, and they were stranded in an unfamiliar and hostile land. Their planet, once home to a powerful civilization, was now a wasteland. The war that had destroyed their world had left them with nothing but empty resources and shattered hopes. Lyra and Zara had been born on the planet's largest city, where their people once thrived. But now, all that remained was dust and ruins. The enemy faction that had attacked their world was relentless, and many had perished in the conflict. The twins had narrowly escaped the destruction. But now they faced their worst enemy, starvation. They had no choice but to journey across the planet's rugged terrain, searching for food and shelter. They had hoped to find some hidden supplies, but with each passing day, it became harder to survive. Their bodies were weakening, their energy drained. But they refused to give up. They couldn't let their family's legacy die. Their mission was clear: find a way to survive, and perhaps, one day, return to rebuild their fallen world. As they trekked through a dense forest, their steps grew slower. Lyra's stomach growled loudly, but she ignored it. Zara's once vibrant green skin had begun to dull, and her eyes lacked the sparkle they had once held. The twins' hearts were heavy with the knowledge that their survival depended on finding help that might not come. They had always been strong, always been able to take care of themselves, but now they were vulnerable. They could feel the emptiness inside them, the hunger gnawing at their insides. The twins knew they couldn't last much longer. If they didn't find food soon, they would be nothing but a memory. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. As the sky began to darken, Zara spotted something in the distance. A ship. A human ship. She couldn't believe her eyes. It was unlike anything she had seen before, sleek, with markings that identified it as one from the human race. She turned to Lyra, her heart racing. "Lyra, look, a ship." Lyra squinted at the object in the distance. At first she thought it was a mirage, a trick of the dying light. But the ship was real. It was coming closer. Could it be a rescue ship? Or was it another enemy, hunting them down to finish what they had started? "I don't know," Lyra said cautiously. "Should approach carefully. We don't know who it is." Zara nodded, but her hope was growing. The twins had never encountered a human before, but stories of their resilience and bravery had traveled across the galaxy. Perhaps this human could help them? As they got closer, the ship landed softly in a clearing. The hatch opened with a hiss, and a tall human emerged. His dark brown hair was messy from the crash, and his uniform was tattered, but his eyes were kind and alert. He looked like a soldier, someone accustomed to the roughness of space travel. But what caught Lyra and Zara's attention were his hands. He carried a small pack of supplies, a weapon strapped to his side, and a look of determination on his face. He was alone. The twins froze. They weren't sure what to do next. This human might be their only hope for survival, but they had no idea what his intentions were. They could sense no immediate danger from him, but their instincts told them to stay wary. The human, noticing the twins, paused for a moment. His eyes narrowed as he studied them, then his face softened. Are you okay?" I asked. His voice a mixture of surprise and concern. Lyra and Zara exchanged a look. They were too weak to speak, but they didn't need words. The human could see it in their eyes, the desperation, the hunger, the helplessness. With a slow, cautious step, the human approached them. "I'm Captain Ethan Hayes," he said, his voice gentle. "You look like you could use some help." Lyra's heart raced. She wasn't sure what kind of help he could offer, but she knew they had no choice. They were too weak to travel any further, and the night was fast approaching. They needed shelter, food, and warmth, something this human might provide. "Help. Us," Zara said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan's eyes softened even more, and without hesitation, he reached into his pack and pulled out a small ration bar. "Here," he said, offering it to them. "It's not much, but it should keep you going for now." The twins hesitated. They had never trusted anyone so quickly, especially not a stranger from a completely different world. But their hunger was overwhelming, and they had no other choice. Zara took the ration bar first, then Lyra followed suit. For a moment, the only sound was the quiet rustling of the trees around them and the soft chewing of the food. It wasn't much, but it was enough to settle the gnawing hunger inside them, if only for a little while. Ethan watched them closely, sensing their unease. He knew they were struggling, both physically and emotionally. His instincts told him they weren't from around here. Valen was far from a peaceful world. Something had happened to them, something terrible, and he was certain they needed more than just food. They needed protection. "My ship's not in great shape," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "But if you want, you can come with me. Try to get us out of here." Lyra and Zara exchanged a look. They didn't know if they could trust this human, but he had given them food when they had nothing. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to them. Without a word, they nodded. Double quotes. "Thank you," Lyra said, her voice barely audible. Ethan smiled, a warm smile that felt genuine. "No need to thank me. It's the least I can do. Out. Now, let's get you out of here." As the human led them back to his ship, the twins couldn't help but wonder what this strange connection meant. They had no idea where their journey would take them or what the future held, but one thing was certain: they weren't alone anymore. The human had given them hope, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the future didn't seem so dark. The next few days were a blur of activity. Ethan's ship, though not in the best condition, was a safe haven compared to the dangerous planet they had been stranded on. Lyra and Zara settled in quickly, though they were still cautious around their human companion. The ship wasn't large, but it was enough for the three of them. There were beds in the small quarters, a simple kitchen, and the cockpit where Ethan worked tirelessly to repair the damaged systems. As much as they wanted to relax, the twins couldn't ignore the weight of their situation. They were alone on an unknown planet with only a human for company. It was hard to trust someone they had just met, especially someone from an entirely different species.
Oh.
But there was something about Ethan that made them feel safer. The way he had risked his own life to protect them, the way he listened to them without judgment. These small acts began to build a fragile bond between them. For the first time in what felt like forever, the twins were able to sit down and eat a proper meal. It wasn't much, just basic ration packs that Ethan had managed to gather, but it felt like a luxury. They hadn't eaten a proper meal in days, and the food warmed them in a way nothing else could. As they ate, Zara glanced over at Ethan. He was focused on his work, sitting in the cockpit, his hands moving swiftly over the control panel. It wasn't a large, comfortable ship, but it was sturdy, and Ethan had done a good job keeping it operational, the way he moved so easily among the buttons and switches made it clear he was experienced. Zara couldn't help but admire his skill. "You're good at this," Zara said, breaking the silence. Ethan looked up from the console, offering a small smile. "Thanks. I've had a lot of practice," he replied. "I'm just glad I could help you both." The twins exchanged a glance. Ethan had been nothing but kind to them since they met. He had shared his food, offered shelter, and even risked his life for theirs. Yet despite his actions, there was still a barrier between them. They were from different worlds, different cultures. How could they ever truly understand each other? Lyra's mind wandered as she sat in the small dining area. She watched Ethan from across the room, his focused expression as he worked. She couldn't help but feel conflicted. Part of her wanted to trust him completely, but another part of her was unsure. How could she know if he was truly trustworthy? What did he want from them? Zara seemed to sense her unease and spoke softly. "You're thinking too much." Lyra turned her head, surprised by her sister's words. "What do you mean? You've been watching him all day." "Not a threat, Lyra," Zara said. "I know we're not used to trusting others, but he's different. He's been nothing but kind to us." Lyra sighed, running a hand through her dark hair. "I know, but I don't know anything about him. We can't just ignore the fact that we're stranded on his ship, with no idea how long we'll be here or where we'll go next." Zara gave her a soft smile. "I understand. But sometimes, trust is something you have to give." He's shown us more kindness than anyone else ever has. Maybe it's time we stop questioning it." Lyra fell silent, considering her sister's words. It was hard to ignore the growing sense of safety she felt when she was around Ethan. Despite the uncertainty of their situation, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were on the right path. She wasn't sure where it would lead, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like they had a chance. The next day, Ethan took the twins out to explore the nearby landscape. He explained that the ship was still being repaired, and while they waited for the systems to fully come online, they could take the opportunity to get some fresh air. The planet wasn't the same as their homeworld, but it was beautiful in its own way. The sky was a deep blue, and the landscape was dotted with strange but colorful plants. The air was cool and crisp, a welcome change from the heat of the desert-like terrain they had been stuck on. Lyra and Zara walked beside Ethan, their curiosity growing with each step. It was clear that Ethan had a strong understanding of survival, and as he explained the local flora and fauna, the twins began to relax. There was something about his calm demeanor that made them feel at ease. He wasn't like anyone they had ever met, and despite their differences, they were beginning to see him as more than just a stranger. As they reached a small clearing, Ethan stopped and turned to face them.
"Oh.
"There's a place nearby that's safe to gather food," he said, "but we'll need to be careful. There are still some dangers in this area." Lyra and Zara exchanged a glance but nodded. They were used to danger. Their homeworld had been full of it, but they trusted Ethan. If he thought it was safe, they were willing to follow his lead. They spent the next few hours collecting food and water. By the time they returned to the ship, the sun was setting. The peaceful walk through the forest had given them a sense of normalcy, something they hadn't felt in a long time. For once, they didn't feel like they were on the run. They felt safe. That evening, as they sat around the small table in the ship's dining area, Lyra couldn't help but feel a growing sense of gratitude toward Ethan. He had brought them from the edge of death to a place where they could start again, even if they didn't know exactly what that meant. As they ate, Ethan spoke up, his voice filled with the calm assurance that had come to comfort them. "I'm not sure what's next for all of us, but whatever happens, you're not alone anymore. I'll help you get through this." Lyra looked at him, her heart full. She wasn't sure if she fully understood what this connection meant, but for the first time since their world fell apart, she had hope. And hope was something she hadn't felt in a long time. The days passed by slowly, but a strange sense of calm had settled over the small crew. Ethan had repaired the ship enough for them to leave the planet, but each day they spent together. The bond between the human and the alien twins grew stronger. Lyra and Zara found themselves drawn to Ethan in ways they hadn't expected. Though they were far from home and their world was still in ruins, they no longer felt completely lost. In the mornings, it would help Ethan with small tasks around the ship. Lyra worked on organizing the supplies while Zara helped him with the navigation system, trying to learn what she could about human technology. Ethan, ever patient, would explain everything in simple terms, his calm voice making the lessons easier to understand. As he worked, he would often glance at them, a soft smile playing on his lips. There was something about the way he looked at them that made both twins feel like they were not just guests on his ship, but an important part of something larger. Despite their growing comfort with Ethan, both Lyra and Zara still felt the weight of their past. Their homeworld was gone, their people scattered or wiped out, and the future seemed uncertain. But with Ethan's presence, things felt more hopeful. For the first time in a long time, they had someone to lean on. He didn't ask about their past, never pushed them to share things they weren't ready to talk about. He simply accepted them for who they were. One evening, as the stars twinkled in the dark sky, the three of them sat around the small table in the dining area. The soft hum of the ship's engines was the only sound filling the space. Ethan had made another simple meal, vegetables, and some preserved protein, but to the twins, it felt like a feast. It wasn't just the food they appreciated, but the fact that they were safe, that they weren't alone anymore. As they ate, Zara spoke up, her voice quiet but full of curiosity. "Ethan, do you ever miss your home, your planet? Ethan paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. It was a simple question, but it made him think. He set the fork down and sighed softly. I suppose I do. It's hard not to think about home when you're in a place that's so different. But I guess after traveling so much, I've come to learn that home isn't just a place. It's the people you're with. Lyra and Zara exchanged glances. Ethan's words struck a chord deep within them. They'd always thought of home as the place they had been born, the planet Valen, the family they had lost. But now, they were beginning to understand that home could be something more. What do you mean? Lyra asked, her voice soft but full of interest. Ethan smiled a little, wistful. I mean that no matter where I go, no matter how far from Earth I get, I always carry the people I care about with me. They're what make anywhere feel like home. For a moment there was a heavy silence. Lyra and Zara felt something shift in the air between them. There was an unspoken understanding now, a shared feeling that their time with Ethan was changing them in ways they hadn't expected. The next day, as the ship continued its journey through the vast expanse of space, Lyra found herself standing beside the window, staring out at the stars. The lights of distant worlds twinkled in the distance. One a reminder of how vast the universe was and how small they were in comparison. She had never felt so far from home, yet at the same time, she didn't feel entirely alone. Ethan's presence gave her a sense of comfort she hadn't realized she needed. Zara joined her, standing quietly by her side. She, too, had been feeling the same weight, the same mix of uncertainty and hope. Do you think we'll ever find our people again? She asked softly, her gaze fixed on the endless void outside. Lyra turned to her sister, her brow furrowed as she considered the question. I don't know, but I think we can make a new life here. With Ethan. Zara nodded, her eyes distant as she thought about their past, about the family they had lost. But there was something different now. There was hope. Maybe. We can make a future. One that's not so empty. Lyra gave a small smile, the warmth of her sister's words filling her with a sense of peace. Yes, together we can rebuild. Later that evening, after another long day of repairs and tasks, around the ship, Ethan joined them for a quiet dinner. As they sat together, eating and talking about their plans, there was a shift in the air, a change that none of them could quite explain. The more time they spent together, the more they began to feel a connection that went beyond mere survival. It wasn't just gratitude or duty, it was something deeper, something that neither of them had expected. Over the next few days, as they continued their journey through space, Lyra and Zara started to notice the subtle shifts in their emotions. There was a warmth they felt toward Ethan that went beyond kindness. The way he cared for them, the way he listened, the way he protected them without asking for anything in return, was something they had never experienced before. Slowly, they started to realize that they were developing feelings for him, not just as someone who had helped them survive, but as someone who might be a part of their future. It was a confusing feeling, but it was also a comforting one. Ethan had become someone they could rely on, someone who made them feel safe. And, as the days passed, they began to wonder if their bond with him might be the key to their own future. Perhaps, after everything they had been through, they had finally found a place where they truly belonged. But as they continued to learn about each other, both Ethan and the twins understood that this connection wasn't just about survival. It was about something much deeper, a bond that none of them had expected, but all of them needed. The days aboard the ship had become a routine of sorts, but the air between Ethan and the twins was thick with unspoken words. Lyra and Zara had grown closer to Ethan, but the more time they spent with him, the more they began to feel a sense of confusion. Their growing feelings for him were undeniable, but they struggled to understand what those feelings meant. They had lost everything: friends, family, their homeworld, and now here they were, far from home, building a bond with a human. It was a quiet evening when the truth began to surface. The ship had settled into a stable orbit around a nearby moon, and the stars outside sparkled brightly in the endless expanse of space. The soft hum of the engines was the only sound as Lyra and Zara sat at the table in the small dining area, eating a simple meal. Ethan sat across from them, his expression thoughtful, as if he was wrestling with something important in his mind. Lyra was the first to speak. She had felt a weight in her chest all day, and she couldn't ignore it anymore. "Ethan," she began, her voice softer than usual, "there's something we need to talk about." Ethan looked up at her, his gaze meeting hers with concern. "What is it, Lyra?" Zara, who had been quiet up until now, added, "It's about us. About you." The human raised an eyebrow but stayed silent, waiting for them to continue. The room felt suddenly heavier, as if everything they had been avoiding had finally caught up with them. Lyra took a deep breath, her eyes downcast as she struggled to put her thoughts into words. We don't understand this. The way we feel about you. It's not just gratitude anymore. It's more than that. And we don't know what to do with it." Zara nodded in agreement. "We're not used to feeling this way. We've never connected with someone like this before." Ethan's eyes softened, and he leaned forward slightly, his voice gentle. "I understand. I've been feeling it too. There's something about you too, something that's hard to explain.
I
Need you both to know that I care about you? More than I ever expected." The words hung in the air for a moment, and the twins exchanged a glance. It was true. Ethan's actions had shown them nothing but kindness, but now they were beginning to realize that it wasn't just kindness, it was affection. They had come to care for him deeply. But what did that mean? Could they really build a future with a human? Could their bond be something that would last? "We've been told all our lives that there was a prophecy," Lyra said quietly, looking down at the table. "A prophecy that said the fate of our people, our future, depended on the choice of a human. That one day a human would come, and they would help us rebuild, help us create a future." Zara's voice was barely a whisper as she continued. "We never believed it. We thought it was just a myth, something to give our people hope in times of despair. But now, we're starting to understand what it means." Ethan blinked in surprise. A prophecy. The twins nodded in unison, their expressions serious. "It's been part of our culture for centuries. The prophecy speaks of a human who will not only help our species survive, but will also become a part of our future, of our legacy." Ethan was silent for a long time, processing the information. He had always known that the twins were different from humans in many ways, but he hadn't expected this. A prophecy that involved him. This was beyond anything he had ever imagined. "So, what does this mean?" Ethan asked, his voice laced with concern. "Does it mean I'm supposed to become a part of your future in some way?" Lyra and Zara exchanged another look. They hadn't known how to explain it, how to make sense of their feelings. But now, with the prophecy hanging over them, it seemed like their bond with Ethan was more than just a coincidence. "We don't know what this means for us," Lyra said slowly, her voice trembling slightly. "We don't know what our future holds, or what it means to have you in it. But we can't deny that you've become more than just someone who helped us survive. You're a part of us now." Zara nodded, her voice stronger. "We may not understand everything about this prophecy, but we know that it speaks of a human who will help us rebuild our world. And we believe that you're that human." Ethan sat back, his mind racing. He had never imagined anything like this. He had come to the planet to help two strangers. But now, he was being told that he might be the key to their future, the future of an entire species. "I never expected any of this," Ethan said quietly, more to himself than to the twins. "I came here to fix my ship and help you to get by. But now, hearing all of this, it feels like we're part of something bigger, something I don't fully understand." Lyra and Zara were quiet for a moment, each processing the weight of the words they had shared. They had known their connection with Ethan was growing, but now, with the prophecy revealed, everything felt different. Their feelings for him weren't just about survival anymore. They were about something deeper, a future they hadn't even dared to dream of until now. Ethan looked at them both, now his expression serious. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm not going to walk away from this. I'll help you both. I'll help you rebuild." The words were simple, but they carried more meaning than either of the twins could have expected. In that moment, They felt the weight of the prophecy, but they also felt something else: hope. The future might still be uncertain, but with Ethan by their side, it didn't seem as impossible as it once had. "We don't know what the future will be like, but we're glad you're here with us," Lyra said softly, her voice full of emotion. Zara smiled gently, her eyes filled with the same warmth. "We're not alone anymore." Ethan smiled back at them, his heart full. "No, you're not. Neither am I." The days following their conversation about the prophecy were filled with tension and uncertainty. The ship continued its journey through space, but the air between Ethan and the twins had shifted. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about something deeper, something that none of them had expected. Lyra and Zara knew they had to make a choice. The prophecy was clear, or at least they believed it was. But what did it mean for them? What did it mean for their future with Ethan? It wasn't just about being rescued anymore. It was about forging a new path, one that might involve things they hadn't considered before. Ethan, too, felt the weight of the situation. He had come to care for the twins in a way he hadn't expected, but he wasn't sure what his role was in their future. He had always been a soldier, a man used to following orders, but this was different. This wasn't about duty, it was about choice. And it was a choice he didn't take lightly as the ship continued its journey. Ethan spent more time thinking about what the twins had told him. He had never believed in prophecies, but what they had said seemed to make sense in a way. He'd really be the one to help them rebuild their world. Could he become a part of their future? One evening, as the stars outside the ship twinkled softly, the three of them gathered in the small dining area. The hum of the ship's engines was a constant background noise, but it felt oddly peaceful. It had been a long Ditothan had been working on the ship's engines, and the twins had been helping with navigation. They were all exhausted, but there was something else hanging in the air, something neither of them could ignore. Zara was the first to speak. "Ethan, do you think we can really rebuild?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with emotion. "Can we really make a new future for ourselves, for our people?" Ethan looked at her, his expression thoughtful. He had been asking himself the same question. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he had come to care for them. Deeply, it was impossible to ignore the bond that had formed between them. They were no longer just strangers, they were a team, working together toward something unknown. "I don't know what the future holds, Zara," Ethan said, his voice steady. "But I do know one thing. I'm not going to leave you too. We've made it this far, and we'll keep going. Whatever happens, I'm with you." Lyra, who had been quietly listening, felt a knot in her chest loosen at Ethan's words. She had never felt so uncertain about the future, yet his promise gave her a sense of peace. She looked at her sister, and then at Ethan. "But what about the prophecy? What about the future we're supposed to create together?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He could see the doubt in their eyes, the uncertainty. The prophecy was something they believed in, something that had been passed down through generations. But was it possible to fulfill a prophecy that involved so much unknown? Was he truly the one they had been waiting for? "I don't know if I'm the one in the prophecy," Ethan said, his voice calm but filled with conviction. "But I do know that I want to help you both. I care about you. I don't know if that's what the prophecy means, but I'll do whatever I can to make sure you're safe, to make sure we build something better." There was a silence between them, a heavy but comfortable silence. The twins exchanged a look. They had always been strong, but now they felt something new. They had always believed that the prophecy was just a myth, something to cling to in the darkest times. But now, with Ethan by their side, they were beginning to believe that perhaps it wasn't just a myth. "Maybe it was real. We'll figure it out together," Zara said, her voice firm but gentle. "The future doesn't have to be something we're afraid of. We can build it together with you." Lyra nodded, her heart swelling with emotion. "Yes, we may not know what comes next, but we know we have each other. And that's enough for now." Ethan smiled at them, the weight of the moment settling on his shoulders. It wasn't going to be easy. They had no idea where their journey would take them, and they had no way of knowing if they would ever find their people or rebuild their world. But they were together now, And that meant more than anything else. Later that night, as they prepared for sleep, the ship's alarms suddenly blared. Ethan's eyes snapped open, and he bolted upright. The twins rushed into the cockpit where Ethan was already scanning the control panel. Something was wrong, something he didn't fully understand. "There's a ship approaching," Ethan said, his voice tense. "And it's not friendly." The twins' eyes widened. "What do we do?" Lyra asked, fear creeping into her voice. Ethan didn't hesitate. "We fight. We won't let them take us." The reality of their situation hit them all at once. They had come so far, but danger was still a constant companion. The future they had dreamed of was still out of their reach, and the enemies they had faced before were still out there, waiting to strike. But as Ethan prepared for the confrontation, Lyra and Zara stood beside him, ready to face whatever came next. The uncertainty of the future was still there, but now, with each other, they knew they had the strength to face it. The ship shook as alarms blared throughout the cockpit. Ethan quickly adjusted the controls, his mind focused and sharp. He had dealt with enemy forces before, but this time, he wasn't alone. Lyra and Zara stood by his side, ready to face whatever. Danger was coming their way. The distant ship, which had appeared on their radar moments before, was closing in fast. The shapes of enemy vessels began to emerge from the darkness of space. Ethan could tell they were not here for a peaceful visit. "This is it," Ethan muttered, his hands moving quickly over the controls. "We're going to have to fight, Lyra." And Zara exchanged a glance, their fear hidden behind determined expressions. They had been through so much, already lost their world, lost everything they knew. But they had gained something precious in the process. Hope. They weren't going to let it slip away now. Ethan could see the resolve in their eyes. They were ready. It was as if their journey had prepared them for this moment. They had learned to rely on each other, and that strength was going to be tested. "Now, we have to defend this ship," Ethan said, his voice steady, but filled with urgency. "Get to the weapons. We need to be ready." The twins nodded and quickly moved to the weapons bay. They had been trained in the basics of defense on their home planet, but they had never faced anything like this. Their hearts raced as they armed themselves with the weapons Ethan had shown them. The weight of the guns was reassuring. They weren't completely helpless. They could fight. The enemy ships moved closer, their dark forms growing larger on the display screens. Ethan knew they didn't have much time. He had to make a choice, fight or try to escape. But with the condition of the ship and the size of the enemy force, running wasn't an option. "Ready?" Ethan asked, his voice calm despite the tension in the air. Lyra and Zara took their positions, their faces serious. "Ready?" They both answered in unison. The first volley of enemy fire hit the shields of Ethan's ship. The entire vessel shuddered, but the shields held. It was a small victory, but it wouldn't last long. The enemy was relentless, and their firepower was far stronger than anything Ethan had anticipated. He knew that if they didn't strike back soon, the ship wouldn't survive much longer. "We need to return fire," Ethan called out as he adjusted the targeting system. Zara gripped the gun tightly, her hands steady despite the growing danger. She had never fought in space before, but she wasn't going to let fear take over now. She aimed at one of the approaching ships and fired. The weapon's blast shook the ship, and she saw the enemy vessel recoil, taking damage from the blast. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Ethan grinned, a hint of pride in his eyes. "Good shot, Zara." Lyra, standing next to her sister, fired her own weapon, sending a blast of energy toward another enemy ship. The shots weren't perfect, but they were enough to make the enemy think twice. The twins' training from their world was paying off, and Ethan could see that they were more than just survivors. The battle raged on. The battle raged on, each side exchanging fire, the space around them lit with flashes of energy. Ethan kept his focus, trying to outmaneuver the enemy ships while coordinating with Lyra and Zara. The twins worked together seamlessly, each covering the other's blind spots, working like a well-oiled machine. But as the fight continued, it became clear that the enemy had more ships than they did. Ethan's ship was taking damage, and their defenses were beginning to weaken. The shields flickered, and the engines groaned under the strain. It wasn't looking good. We can't keep this up much longer, Ethan said, his voice tense. We need to find a way out of here. Just as he spoke, one of the enemy ships made a move that caught Ethan off guard. It aimed directly for the heart of the ship, the engines. A shot rang out and the ship jolted violently, throwing everyone off balance. The ship was hit. Engine room now, Ethan ordered, his voice urgent. Need to stabilize the ship or we're done for. The twins didn't hesitate. They had been through enough to know when things were serious. They followed Ethan to the engine room, where sparks flew from damaged wires and alarms rang loudly in their ears. The engine was severely damaged, and if they didn't fix it, the ship would be dead in space. Ethan worked quickly, using his experience to assess the damage. We've got to reroute the power to the engines, he said, his mind racing through the steps. We might not be able to outrun them, but we can still hold our ground. Lyra and Zara worked alongside him, their focus sharp. Together, they followed Ethan's instructions, making repairs as quickly as they could. Time was running out. As the last of the repairs were completed, Ethan let out a sigh of relief. That should hold us for a little while. Not for long, Lyra said, her voice tense as she glanced at the monitors. They're still coming. Ethan turned to the twins, his expression determined. We're not giving up. We've come too far to lose now. We're going to make it out of this. With the engines back online, the ship surged forward, breaking free of the enemy's pursuit. The battle was far from over, but they had gained some ground. Ethan set course for a nearby planet one that might offer shelter, at least for a while. It wasn't the victory they had hoped for, but it was a start. As they moved into the safety of the planet's atmosphere, the adrenaline slowly started to fade. The ship's damage was significant, but they were alive. They had survived. Twins stood by Ethan, their faces tired but filled with something new hope. The future was still uncertain, but they had made it through another test. Together, we did it, Zara said, her voice filled with relief. Ethan looked at them, a smile on his face. Yeah, we did. The future was still unknown, but with the bond they had formed, they knew they could face whatever came next. They'd made it this far, and that was a victory in itself.